Hello and welcome to What Women Want Today podcast, season 3, the Soul Sister series, where we will tackle tough topics straight from our heart to yours. I'm Terry Kellums, your host and coach for women who struggle to find meaning and fulfillment in midlife.
I am Amanda Keeper. I am your new regular contributor. I come straight from the Midwest, Rockford, Illinois. I'm a public speaking teacher and leadership development professor. I'm also a coach and clinical mental health counselor. I am so thrilled to be here, and let's get started.
Let's do it. Hello, new week. Here we are. Another episode of the podcast with my friend Amanda Keeper. How are you today?
Hi, I'm great. Thank you so much. I'm excited to talk about self-awareness today. So I'm just kind of giddy today.
I know, it's great. So before we jump into our topic today, I have to ask you a question.
Yes.
Is there something you're particularly grateful for today?
Yes, absolutely. So I am taking a trip to North Carolina this weekend, and I need to go do some finances. And I couldn't find the key to a drop box that's very, very important. After my parents passed away, there's a lot of documents in there, and I could not find it anywhere. And two things happened that I was super grateful for. Well, one of them was, I don't know if this happens to any of you, but I was dreaming last night, and it came to me where that key was. Like, it was clear as day where that key was. And I woke up this morning and I knew exactly where to look. I went and found my mom's purse. And it was the purse that she had in her hospital room the day she died. And it took me 3 seconds and I found the key.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
I just started bawling because I was so grateful. Not that I necessarily found the key, but that like my intuition and my connection with my mom was so strong that it came to me in my sleep. But then even as important was, I went down and I was bawling this morning, and my 17-year-old son, who's really not an emotional kind of guy, just stopped, pulled me in, and gave me the longest, warmest hug that he's ever given me in his life. I didn't even know he had it in him. It wasn't like a short hug. It wasn't like the "you're going to be okay, mom" hug.
Yeah.
It was like, "I'm here for you." It was like a 20-second hug, and I let go first.
Oh, that's awesome. What a great way to start the day too, right?
Yeah. How about you,
man.
What are you grateful for today?
You know what? I'm going to say I'm grateful for my husband. And I know that sounds like a very cliche kind of answer, but I have a little story to back it up, because we, as you know, we have a lot of irons in the fire almost all the time. And oftentimes just taking time for him and I to connect or to have fun, or maybe it's disconnect sometimes from all the irons in the fire, and just carve out some time to just really enjoy our time together and have some fun. It seems like it gets put on the back burner quite often. And this really relates to today's topic, because the reason I'm grateful for him is that he set that time aside. And I know that about myself. I know that if I go too long without having pleasure, having some joy, having some fun, disconnecting from all of the things, quote unquote, the things, and just be present in the moment and enjoy each other and connect again. I need that. I know that about myself, which I think is, one of the things we're going to talk about today is something that you and I both learned from John Maxwell years ago now, is in order to grow yourself, you have to first know yourself. So that's our topic for today, grow yourself. And I said to Amanda, let's not have any side conversation about this. Let's independently write our thoughts down, come to the table, and just have a very genuine, authentic conversation about this, because it is exciting. It is exciting to know yourself.
Yes,
so here we are.
It's exciting, and there's a lot of benefits to knowing yourself. So if you don't mind, I want to jump right in on the benefits of knowing yourself.
Yes.
So for those of you that haven't listened to any of our prior podcasts, I am a professor at Rock Valley College in the Midwest. And one of the things that I always teach my students is, if you are going to share content, let's back it up with some research. So the professor and me did a little research. And this comes from an article that we'll post in the show notes from Psychology Today. And it's called 6 Specific Ways to Know Who You Are. And so I'll pull from some of those when it's my turn. But first, I want to talk about the benefits of knowing yourself. Number 1, if you know yourself, and the better you know yourself, the happier you will be, because you will be able to express your desires more clearly and concisely to those that you love. Number 2, you will have less inner conflict. So when your outside actions are in accordance with your inside feelings, you have less inner conflict because you are living in your integrity. Number 3, yes. Number 3, the benefit of also knowing yourself is you make better decisions. If you know yourself, you know how to decide. Things from small decisions like what sweater you'll buy to where you'll go to dinner. Number 4, self-control. The more self-awareness you have, the more self-control you have. So you will understand what motivates you, and you will try to resist bad habits and develop better ones. Number 5, you will have better resistance to social pressure. When you know yourself, you will have better resistance to social pressure. You'll be able to say no more. And then number 6, I love this one. When you know yourself, you have more tolerance and understanding of other people. You know how hard it is to get to the point where you feel confident and comfortable in your own skin, and you know what a journey and a process that is. So you are able to sit with people in their integrity and honor them for what they bring to the table.
For those of you watching me on YouTube right now, I've got a little 5-pound dog trying to boss me around. He wants to get up on the chair next to me, but he refuses to let me grab him to put him up on the chair next to me. So sorry if that was distracting, but I love that whole list. And I love that you want to back it up. I think if we looked back on the podcast, like over the past couple of years or few years, I probably have done a lot of the same thing. I always want to not just like have a topic in my heart that I feel strongly about that I want to share the knowledge of, but it's also like, well, what does that really mean? Like, let's get to the heart of a matter. So I love that you did that. I made a list on my phone.
Yay.
And I think when you were talking, I heard probably number 1 coming out in there in a couple of different ways. And so my very first one is know your values, because they will help you understand your behavior. And I've talked about this on the podcast before, and I can put another link to the article or the list on Google. I think it's like the top 100 list of values or something like that. I'll put it in the show notes again. But I think if you decide to go through that exercise, which I think is a good one, I think you may be tempted, and I really want to just caution you not to do this, is to look at that whole list. And there are some very wonderful things on that list, 100 values. There's incredible things on that list. They're not all going to be your values, and you shouldn't feel bad about that. I mean, you know, like I'll say my number 1 value is probably health. And I guess I don't really think of them in chronological order so much, but I do know that it's a very strong value of mine, because I was telling Amanda that I didn't get much sleep last night, but I still got my butt up and went to the gym. And I'm sitting in the parking lot of the grocery store afterwards, and I'm like, what can I feed my body? Because I'm tired today. I didn't get enough sleep last night to really sustain me through this day, but I'm not just going to like give in and just go get fast food for dinner tonight. So this meal is going to have to be something healthy for me. So when you really understand your values, you will then really be able to understand your behaviors a lot more, like what really drives you.
Yes, I love that one. And I think I've done that exercise with many clients in my practice. And I think it's interesting sometimes when I look at that value list with them, I like to look at ones that I can immediately cross off the list and be like, yeah, no, that's not me.
Right. Yeah. Well, you know what? That's a great point, Amanda. Sometimes it's easier to say it's blindingly obvious that one is not me. And that just, starts to eliminate a lot of the ones on the list. And I mean, there are things on that list. I wish I could think of one off the top of my head that, it's probably a very nice value, and it probably should be somewhere on my list, but it's just not. It just
Yeah.
doesn't,
Oh,
it doesn't drive my behavior. It doesn't make me want to change the way I behave or act or respond in any kind of way. And that's a pretty good indication that that's not even in your top 10, which is fine.
yeah. No, I agree. And I will give you an example. I run into this a lot with students and with clients. And this is the value of perfectionism.
Mm.
My son is like this, and I have many, many students like this as well. And it truly drives them. They strive for absolute perfection, and that comes in their academics and in their health and in their sports. Many, many, many of my athletes are perfectionists. And it's interesting because most people would say right away, oh, bad, bad, bad. That's so bad, right? But
Mm.
think about the careers and also the hobbies and interests where really having an eye for that perfectionism really helps you and aids you for your goals.
Well,
So,
absolutely. Like if you have a surgeon, don't you want him to be a
yes,
perfectionist? It's like, I
great
don't want
example.
anybody else operating on me. They better be a perfectionist.
Yes. I want the surgeon who has OCD and who is absolutely just obsessed.
Yes, yes.
All right. Well,
Um,
that was a fantastic one. And I have to give you a shout out, Terry, because I know you didn't look at this research, and values is the number one. Actually, this article calls it Know Your Vitals, the building blocks of self. And she calls them Know Your Vitals. And you just nailed the first one, Know Your Values.
yeah, win, win.
All right. So I'm going to go with number 2 on the vitals, and then I'll connect Terry's to each of these because I know that they're in here. She's just so brilliant. But number two is interests. So to really know yourself, you need to understand what your interests are. So this includes your passions, your hobbies, and anything that draws your attention for sustained periods of time. So I love this question, and our listeners, I hope that you will kind of take this challenge, but what are you curious about? What do you
Mm,
always want to know more about?
right.
And you don't even have to get paid, or you don't have to have an A to study it. Like, you are just so curious about these things. What are those things you're curious about? For me,
Hmm.
I'm curious about human behavior. So obviously that's why I went into counseling. That's why we went into coaching, Terry. I love to understand how people work and think and feel, and how that contributes to living a joyful life. And then also how that like really blocks people. So psychology is just something I'm super curious about. How about you, Terry? What are you so curious about?
Well, it's interesting because when you were talking about the perfectionist thing, my mind's and human behavior, my mind's automatically going to the perfectionists are probably an Enneagram 1. And when you
Yeah.
just said this one, like the curiosity thing, that's probably an Enneagram 5. They're very
Okay.
curious. They want to know a lot. But also interesting to note is that passions was on my list here. It's on the
Ah,
phone. It's on the list
awesome.
because I think we've heard a lot about like your passions will lead you to your purpose. And
Mhm.
yes, I do believe you need to be passionate about your purpose, but I think our passions are for us. Our purpose is how we show up to serve others. Our passions, that's what gets you out of bed. That's what excites you about life. Like I've talked to so many people who say, well, I don't really think I have any passions. That's sad to me.
Mhm.
That is
Mhm.
sad to me because I feel like I have so many. I have so many passions. So, what am I curious about? I am curious about a lot of things. Like my husband was at the eye doctor this weekend or on Friday, I guess it was, and they told him that he has the beginnings of macular degeneration. So, like, I think a lot of my curiosity is like our body mind connection, like body mind spirit connection, and I'm always like curious about like, okay, so you have this, this diagnosis placed on you, but like what's at the root of it?
Yeah.
What's at the root of it and what can we do about it? Like I'm very solution oriented. So I'm always curious about that kind of stuff. But I love to know people's stories. I'm always curious about people's stories. Like we've got some really good guests coming up on the podcast, and I'm just like my heart is in their story already, just knowing the
Yeah.
little bit that I know. So yeah.
Well,
How about
I
you?
think yeah, we share that in common.
Yeah.
Like I said, I'm just really curious about psychology, and I'm passionate. It's interesting, Terry, you introduced me to this app. I think I've mentioned it before, called Pep Talk. And I was
Hmm.
listening to a pep talk. I don't even remember who was talking. It doesn't matter, but the content was what mattered. And he said, when you have a passion, you don't even need an alarm clock
No.
because your passion will wake you up.
Yeah, I've heard that one.
I cannot tell you, Terry, how many times I dream about content for this podcast, about how I'm going to teach a certain thing in my class, or how I'm going to help someone. I even came up with a question that I want to ask our audience at the end of this podcast today in the midst of my sleep, in my dream. I'm thinking about it all the time. You don't have to say, at this time, think about this, Amanda. No, I'm thinking about it. I want to help people. I've gotten, and I've shared this with you and you've shared it with me, but we have gotten so much great feedback on the first couple of podcasts that we have done. And that's what lights me on fire. Like, let's just keep going and pouring into people.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. So your second one was passion.
My second one was passion. Yeah.
Okay.
You got to know what you're passionate about. That's a big driver for knowing yourself.
Yes. So you have values and passion. Okay. Which connected with the interest on here. So I'm going to go to the next one. And this is huge for me. And I know it is for you, but it's temperament. So temperament is your inborn preferences. So are you an introvert?
This is creepy.
But it's not, because you study human behavior all the time. So it's just affirming you.
Yeah.
So are you an introvert? Are you an extrovert? When you go to a party, are you the person that wants to be on the bar, like, woo-hoo, dancing it up? Or are you the person that is, first of all, I don't want to go to the party, and if you have to force me, I will sit in the back of the room and I will observe everybody. And then how long do I have to be there?
Yeah.
That would be way over on the continuum of introverted. And then there's people like me who are kind of in the middle as I get older, and I do like to go to the party, but I don't know until the day of if I want to go to the party, and I don't know how long I'm going to stay. So temperament is, here's some other things. Are you a planner or a go with the flow type of a person? Do you make decisions more on the basis of thought or on the basis of facts or feelings, rather? So I think of the DISC profile. I think of the Enneagram that we have talked about. Do you prefer details or the big picture? For me, I do not care about the details. As you know, I am much.
But is that across the board, or is that like a situational kind of thing? Because like, there are some things that I do like the details about, but like if it comes to like paperwork kind of stuff, oh God, please don't. Like, please don't, because I can't stand it. I can't take it. But like when it comes to the podcast, like you've seen my Trello board, I have like a checklist. Like it's all a well-oiled machine. It just moves along like it's supposed to move along. And that doesn't happen without getting into the details.
Correct. You have way more of a detail side than I do. Way more. Which is why we are complementary.
That's true.
So I like to think about this in terms of, your temperament in terms of vacationing. This will really help you understand yourself. Are you the person that likes to be spontaneous and figure out where you're going when you get there? Or are you the type of person that likes to plan everything in advance and like have an itinerary? And Terry, I know that you have told me that you and Brian have arrived in different countries and don't even know where you're staying.
It's true. That's more him, though.
I am not that spontaneous.
That's more him. And you know what? I don't think I would be comfortable doing that with just anybody, but like, I trust him. Like I feel safe with him. So I'm able to like go with the flow more when he's in charge, so to speak. But with you, when we plan something, I'm like, let's just see what happens. Let's just, wake up and see what we feel like doing, kind of thing. But I think it's situational sometimes, but you know what? I hope everybody has pen and paper, or at least like goes back, and because you are giving some really great information on, like, I love the information, but I also like love the action. Like these are some very actionable things you can ask yourself. These are things you can journal about. These are like questions to ponder. Like, this isn't going to be for me. I'm going to have to listen to this again just because I want to go back and make sure, like, do I have any like gaps, or am I still questioning anything about myself that I think I've already learned? And, here's the thing, like knowing yourself isn't like, it's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen in a week. It's a process. And sometimes it's not always an easy process. Sometimes it can be a little painful, because you talk about this a lot, Amanda. You say we have blind spots, and we should probably do like a whole entire podcast on blind spots sometimes, because it's fascinating. But in the process of getting to know yourself, when you do uncover something about yourself, and this happened to me when I first started learning about the Enneagram, it's like, whoa, is that true? Like you come across some information and you have to stop and ask yourself, is that true about me? So now I have this question before me, and I'm not liking it. And I have
Mhm.
to ask myself, is that true about me? And is it something that I can change? It's something I want to change, something I want to work on about myself. So this is a process. I hope people will take advantage of all the hard work you've done coming up with some of that, because these are great questions for yourself, truly.
Yeah, and you actually reminded me of how when either the introverted side or the extroverted side in terms of temperament, let's just go
Hmm.
for that alone, there are some real struggles that can come with this. And I think of after COVID, when a lot of the students came back to Rock Valley College, many of them had social anxiety developing that they had never had before. And it is very, very real. And you talk about introverted as, oh, I just prefer to kind of sit back and observe, translates and kind of goes off the rails and becomes, I'm physiologically uncomfortable. I feel nauseous sitting in a room with other people.
Hmm.
There's some things that, if you really don't understand how difficult these things are for yourself, you could really stay in a state of displeasure and mental illness for too
Hmm.
long.
Hmm.
So I think that knowing yourself is also kind of knowing what is your tolerance level for these types of questions. And then if it's to the point where you have dread and physiological, responses that are keeping you in a place in your mind that feels like terror or horror, then, talk to somebody professionally. So,
Absolutely. I think there's going to be a lot of trauma that's not even been recognized yet, that it's come out from the post-COVID era that we've lived through and are still probably living through a little bit. It's interesting that one tied in with my number 3 on my list, which was how to know how to bounce back. So, it's no secret, I've shared on the podcast before, like I've gone through bouts of depression, and not just when it's depression, because that's a much more serious level, but like when you go through what my husband and I kind of call a funk or the
yeah,
blahs,
yeah,
it's like, or you suffer disappointment, is this is about resilience. Like know how to bounce back. Like I feel like everyone should have some strategies in place that says, I recognize now, because I know myself, because I've been working on myself, right? That's what this is all about. I know
mhm,
myself now. I see myself heading down this trail that I don't like. I've been down this path before. It doesn't lead anywhere good. What strategies do I have in place to be able to bounce back quicker from this setback or this disappointment in life or this blah feeling that I'm experiencing? So
oh
that
my
was my
God.
number 3,
Oh,
resilience.
I love that. Yeah, I absolutely love that. You know, how do you know, first of all, what comes to mind is how do you know the difference between being in a funk and depression?
Well, I think depression lasts for a longer period of time.
Correct.
I mean, I think they say like 2 weeks or more, right? If you're
Mhm,
experiencing, and there's a list, you can Google it. If you're experiencing these symptoms for 2 weeks or more,
mhm,
it's probably something you need to get some help with. Not a
mhm.
coach, a mental health professional. There is a difference. So, yeah. And, and a
So
funk is, the brain is so amazing, so complicated. You can almost talk yourself into feeling a funk.
yeah,
So that means you can also talk yourself out of feeling a funk.
100%. And Terry,
Hmm.
when you were talking about bouncing back, just to
Hmm.
give the listeners some idea about how it works for you, what are your resilience tools when you need to bounce back?
Well, we talked about values and how they drive our behavior. So I know when I'm starting to skip out on phone calls with people I love, when
Mhm,
I'm spending more time like in my pajamas and not wanting to put my makeup on, when I'm avoiding any kind of pleasure. It's almost like I'm punishing myself sometimes. Maybe I feel
mhm.
like I haven't worked hard enough, or I let somebody down, or like I know that my mood starts to really drop, and I start to have a lot of like just like stinking thinking, just
Yeah,
everything feels negative, and I'm like, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, I've been here before. This is a
mhm,
temporary This is a
yes,
temporary feeling.
mhm,
What's causing this? And then you identify it. If you're a journaler, like writing down some of those thoughts are just a great way to just kind of like get out of your head a little bit, and just kind of start to rationalize it, because I mean we can be pretty irrational when we're feeling funky like that.
yeah.
So
Those are
yeah,
great
that
tips. Yeah,
mm-hmm.
I love that. I have in clinical mental health counseling, there one technique from solution focused therapy is actually called do the opposite. And
Mm,
so when you notice you are in that funk and all the signs are there, like you just described, if you want to stay in your pajamas and you know those signs, you do the opposite. You force yourself to put on like the pair of shorts and you go for a walk. If you
mm,
want to isolate yourself, then you allow it for a day, but then you start calling people and you reconnect. You do the opposite.
yeah. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So that was called keeping your balance, right?
Mm-hmm. So far,
Okay,
ours
so
are aligned exactly across the board. It's so funny.
yeah. So this one I'm interested if you're going to have one that connects as well, because when I was reading this, I hadn't thought about it, but this is called because this article calls them the vitals,
Right. The
right?
vitals.
The vitals, know your vitals. So this one's called around the clock activities, and this one's all about knowing your biorhythms. And this cracks
Hmm.
me up because Terry, do you ever know your biorhythms?
Oh, for sure.
So when we go on vacation, like Terry is such a creature of habit.
Mm-hmm.
Terry will wake up, like, she likes to drink a cup of coffee for a good 45 minutes to an hour. Um, she does not like conversation, until
I'll listen. I just don't want to talk.
she does not want to talk. And also Terry, she eats at the same exact time every day. When we're on vacation, she would by the end of the week, I was like, Terry would say, have you thought about lunch? And I would start looking up and I would look at my clock and I would say, well, Terry, it's 1:01. So you're right on schedule.
Oh my God, it's so true.
And I'm like, I am so, my biorhythm is so opposite. I'm like, I'll have my cup of coffee when I wake up. I will eat when I'm ready. I mean, a lot of times I don't eat until like 12 or 1 o'clock for the first time. They're not the healthiest behaviors either. I think part of your biorhythm, Terry, is learning how eating and consuming and all of these things help you stay healthy.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
so
Brian will ask me, he'll say like, if we're out and about or whatever, he'll say, are you hungry? Are you getting hungry? And I'm like, well, what time is it? He'll say,
exactly.
he'll say, well, why does it matter what time it is? Are you hungry or are you not hungry? I'm like, well, I'm not right this minute, but if you tell me what time it is,
You tell
I
me
can
what
tell
time it
you.
is, I can tell you exactly when I'll be hungry. And it drives me nuts because my husband is the exact same way. And he really, I'm like, I'm with
Oh,
my husband right now on vacation. But I love it too.
oh,
So what time of the day does your energy peak? This is really good for people to know in terms of their biorhythms. Morning person, night person, uh, you know, d it's interesting. There's this fear of being left out, right, in our
right.
culture.
FOMO. Yep.
FOMO, fear of being left out. And some of the biorhythm things really kick in here. It's like when people who are not night owls don't get
Hmm.
invited to things, it's like because they never go. And it's like, hey, stop not including me. I still want the invite. Just because I'm not going doesn't mean
Right. Yes. There isn't it called like chronotyping or something when you learn out like if you're a dolphin, if you're a night owl, if you're yeah, I
know.
listened to a podcast. Maybe I'll try to find it and put it in the show notes if I can find it.
Yeah.
I know who the guy is. I just don't know if I'd be able to find that exact episode, but it's really interesting. That is actually wonderful, actually, Amanda, that you said that because you're bringing back some memories here. So
Mhm.
if you know your biorhythms or your chronotype, however you pronounce it,
Mhm.
then you can schedule your most important work during that time of the day or your most
Yes.
challenging brain work during that time of day. And then maybe mop the floors at one of the other times that you could care less about, right? It's
Yeah.
very important. This is so fascinating. I'm loving this conversation.
Oh, well, I'm happy.
Mm.
And actually, you just triggered a memory for me from another podcast I was listening to who actually prescribes when all of us should do certain activities. So now that you say that, I'm like, maybe,
Hmm,
maybe not though, because
maybe not.
I know people that, really don't even want to look at the sight of day until 2 o'clock in the afternoon because they're night owls. Like my
Yeah,
grandmother's one of them, right?
yeah, yeah.
So that's interesting. We'll put that in the show notes. Okay,
Yes,
so
let's do it.
I had around the clock activities and looking at biorhythms. What's your next one?
So let's see. My next one is develop your purpose. And I said it will stretch you and take you out of your comfort zone. It contributes to sustainable happiness. So I've talked a lot on podcasts about eudaimonic happiness versus hedonic happiness. So when I talk about happiness now, with all the knowledge I have from doing all that research, I know that sustainable happiness is the goal, not the hedonic in the moment. I just went out to my favorite restaurant, ate my favorite meal, not that kind of happiness, but your purpose, like I said before, your passions are for you. Those are the things that drive you to get out of bed. Those make you feel good about being alive. Your purpose, and Tony Robbins said this: you will never truly feel fulfilled until you discover what your purpose is and live it out. And I love that because I think, this is a complicated one because I think people tend to think purpose means Gandhi, Mother Teresa.
Mhm.
But we were at a funeral over the weekend, and the gentleman that was deceased, they, how everyone gets up and does the little, shares the little stories. This was more of a celebration of life.
Okay.
And they talked about his, I believe his purpose was to spread kindness. And his instrument, ironically, was the bagpipes. And
Oh,
so, like, they had all these stories of how he wanted to spread this kindness. He was such a great neighbor. He like knocked on people's doors. Like he worked for the electric company, and one day he saw a hot rod in the driveway of one of his customers or something, and he knocks on the door and starts talking to the woman. The woman's husband and him became very good friends with him and his wife, and so he just has all these stories of like spreading kindness, and I think that was his purpose.
yes.
And people get wrapped up and they think, oh, I got to do what Mother Teresa did. I got to do what Gandhi did. I got to do these big, huge things. And purpose can be something just that simple. Spreading kindness. And he used his bagpipes. He would go play at the nursing home. He went and played at the school. Like they had all these wonderful, wonderful stories. This is one of the most joyful men that I've ever heard someone describe, because he was constantly giving. He was giving, giving, giving kindness, giving away his gift.
Mhm.
It was amazing. Like, I don't even know this man. I'd never met this man before, and I was so impressed with this man's life, the legacy he left behind. It's
That's
amazing.
so fascinating that you say that. You're triggering a memory of when I was at a funeral of somebody who was in her 90s, and it was my husband's best friend's mother-in-law. And I don't know if any of you have ever experienced similar things that Terry and I are talking about, that I'll share another story, but through the people talking about her life, the way my friend Anne's mom lived her life, and the writing. They shared some of her writing and her deepest thoughts and her
Mhm.
connection to God and her connection to her family members. I felt like I knew her, and I was
Mhm.
so inspired to live a more intentional life just being at the
Mhm.
eulogy of someone I had never met
Yeah.
before.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
so, wow, that's awesome. Well, you shouldn't be surprised that the next one in the Psychology Today article is know your life mission and meaningful goals. I think
I
you could have
swear
written this
to everybody
article.
listening. I swear to everybody listening, we did not plan this.
No, no.
This is why I specifically said let's not talk about it on the side, because I wanted it to just be very authentic and
Yeah,
genuine, like just like it's folding out. So
honestly, so this one I love, and I wanted to ask you this question. So the way that they have people, their readers think about this question is so interesting, and I haven't even thought about it, but maybe if I hear your answer, I'll think of one. So life mission and meaningful goals, ask yourselves, what have been the most meaningful events of your life?
that's a great question. And that
What
would
have been
definitely,
the most meaningful events of your life? And I'll share an example. Says this was a question I'd like to ask when students would ask me for career counseling at the community college where I worked. One woman of about 40 years old got teary-eyed as she tried to answer the question. Recently, she told me, I found it incredibly meaningful to care for my aging father as he declined and went into hospice. I was able to be there and hold his hand when he died. As we talked about the difficulties and rewards of her father's last days, she had an aha moment and realized she wanted to become a hospice nurse.
wow.
So her most, I have goosebumps all over my body. Her most meaningful event of her life, one of them, watching her father pass and being with him, led her to a career goal.
Wow, that's
So, Terry, does anything come to mind for you? What have been the most meaningful events of your life, or does anything pop up?
well, I think every woman listening is probably going to say the day that my children were born, like,
Sure.
um, I had to just pick one meaningful moment outside of child bearing. Hmm. You know what, Amanda? This is going to sound crazy, but I'll tell this to the audience. Amanda has been sharing some of the feedback. Obviously, she's new to the podcast, so she's getting a lot of people listening and giving her great feedback. And I remember having a conversation with a woman who was also a podcaster very early on in my podcasting days. And, we're just kind of talking about, some of our frustrations, some of the things that were kind of hanging us up, and some of the things that were challenging for us. And we got to talking about the stats of our podcast, and she asked me how many, listeners I had for this particular episode or whatever. And I told her, and I said, I wish these numbers were higher. I wish I was making a bigger impact. And she said, Terry, just imagine if that number of people were sitting in your living room wanting to hear you talk about that. And wow, like talking about an emotional moment. And then every time someone reaches out to me to say, hey, I listened to your podcast today, and this is what happened as a result of me listening to your podcast. Amanda shared, she copied and pasted a message that she got into my texts this morning, and I had goosebumps all over my entire body because this woman literally like sectioned out parts of the podcast she had listened to and how they impacted her, what her thoughts were, what it meant to her. And I had goosebumps over my entire body. And then I replied to Amanda and I said, what an incredible gift she just gave us.
Yeah.
What an incredible gift, because not everybody gets that kind of feedback and acknowledgement that they are making a difference. So those moments are so meaningful for me because this is part of my life's purpose. My life's purpose is to help women know that they're not alone, to provide like community and resources so they don't have to go through one of the craziest times of our life, which can be both wonderful and joyful and kind of miserable at the same time some days, and to know that you're simply sitting down, which I say simple, not easy, simply sitting down and sharing the things that are on your heart, and being able to do that with my soul sister and my best friend, like on a weekly basis, super meaningful to me. And, I don't think I've shared this on the podcast yet, but I'm, working on writing a book and taking that book on the road and doing some public speaking with the material in this book. And it's just a further continuation of the impact I hope to have with the message that I feel is my message to give back to the world. So super meaningful.
I love that. It was so beautiful. So a couple of things came to mind for me too. And of course the image was crystal clear of my son being born and me looking at him for the first time and then looking at his father and going, oh my God, he looks just like you. I remember, so many things about that, but my next ones are career as well. Like I have so much dedication and heart for every single person that I serve. And for me, it was right away, like in 2016, I earned Faculty of the Year at my college. And to be affirmed in front of 120 of my peers who are amazing professors, who, in my personal opinion, far and away exceed anything that I ever do, to receive that acknowledgement was, I felt like I have been affirmed in a way I always wanted to be affirmed. And then what happened was after I won that award, it just ignited me to keep pouring in and pouring in and pouring in. And so, I hate to even use that example because I don't want to say that acknowledgement is what is my driver, because it's really not. I've told you, Terry, that I have so much love for my clients when I do clinical mental health counseling that I can't even believe I get paid for it. I truly can't. But it is important, I think, that sometimes we do say good job, and that felt really, really good.
Yeah, so I think you don't always need the validation is probably what you're saying. You don't need the validation to keep doing what you're doing.
No, I would do it every day. Yeah.
But are words of affirmation your love language?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. I think so. It's like I've talked to other people about their love language so many times, but do I sit back and think about my own? I would say absolutely yes.
Yeah. I had a leader several years ago. I never had another leader like him. I've had some really great leaders and I've had some poor ones. He was very unique, a very unique leader. And my husband noticed a difference in my countenance, like right away after this gentleman started being my leader. because I was coming home every day with this like fire and this like passion for what I was doing and excitement. I was so happy. I was so happy with what I was doing. Maybe I'll use the word joyful. I was very joyful in what I was doing and felt like I was where I was supposed to be in life. And that's always a great feeling. But Brian asked me like, what is it? What's different? What's different? And so then I said, I don't know, but I'm gonna start paying attention. So then I would tell him, hey, so and so said this to me today. My boss, I'm not going to say his name. So and so said this to me today. And it was that somebody is noticing that you care and you're doing a great job and you're pouring your heart back into your work, and yeah, we don't always need that to keep going. And it's not going to be, if no one ever gave it to us again, it wouldn't make us stop doing what we're doing. But, damn, it's kind of nice to hear once in a while.
And it goes back to what you said on a previous podcast is like, I see myself the way I see you seeing me.
Right.
And you come home like somebody sees
Somebody's
me
seeing
for
me.
me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh
I mean,
man.
isn't that, I think, I don't know if that's one of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, to be seen. I can't remember them all off the top of my head. I think food, clothing,
It's food,
shelter.
air, water. It's physiological needs, safety and security, love and belongingness, esteem needs like career, and then self-actualization.
But hey, you know what? Throw in a very generous word there now and again. You're
I think
feeding
it
me.
would,
You're seeing me.
yeah. I think to see someone for who they are and to see all of them and even the parts that they have hidden or don't allow to come out because of social expectations or parental guidance or whatever the issue is one of the most beautiful things that you can ever do for anybody.
It's a
So,
gift.
yeah.
It's a gift. I know we need
Okay.
to wrap up. I
Yeah.
had
The last
one.
one. Go ahead.
Oh, go
Yeah.
ahead. Is it your
No,
turn?
no, it's your turn.
Okay. I didn't fully develop my last thought. It's something I'm still working out kind of in my head, but it is something that I think a lot of people will understand. Um, it's about claiming your story. So I've had several women on the podcast who wrote books and talking about how powerful it was for them to kind of own their story. And I was thinking about different parts of my story that aren't always pretty. They don't sound good when I talk about them out loud. Like last week on the podcast, they're not like the best thing that you'd want to put forward about yourself, but they're just a tiny little part of your story. They're not the entire book. So just
Mm,
acknowledging that those things existed and
yeah.
learning to like accept them and just kind of put them where they belong, which is in the past, and leave
Hmm.
them there. And as
Hmm.
long as you're healed and healthy and whole, like claiming your entire story, I put down the best way to do this is to journal, write about the hurts, let them go, because if you don't acknowledge them, they have a lot of power you aren't even aware of.
Yes. Yes. And in my practice, I tell clients that we're not going to stay in the past, but we need to reckon with it and
Mm-hmm.
we need to purge it because if people don't purge their pain, it sits in their body. There's a
Yeah.
book called The Body Keeps the Score. And
Yeah.
if you're interested in how your toxic background or your hard experiences in life sit in your body, read that book. I could not agree more. So it might be similar in this article, but claim your story. I don't know. I like it. And I think it connects. So the last one of your vitals is strengths. Know your strengths.
It was on
And
my list.
I
All
always
the time.
say, that claiming your story is your greatest strength.
It is. It is.
In fact, our first project that we ever had together, Terry, was your powers in your
Your
story.
powers in your story.
So
Yeah.
your powers in your story. So strengths can not only include abilities, skills, and talents, but also character strengths, such as
Mm.
loyalty, respect for others, love of learning, emotional intelligence, fairness. Knowing your strengths is one of the foundations. This is what I absolutely love. Knowing your strengths is one of the foundations to building self-confidence and self-esteem. So not being able to acknowledge your own superpowers could put you on a path to low self-esteem.
Mm.
So, oh man, I see this all the time in the counseling practice. So your strengths are bigger than your roles. Your strengths are bigger than your roles. A lot of females that come into to the practice, my clinical mental health practice, they will find their self-esteem and their strengths in their role, being a mother, being a wife, right? But
Oh,
they don't know their identity or their strengths outside of their role.
so when that happens, so when you've wrapped your whole identity into being a mom, let's say that your choice was to be a stay-at-home mom, which I think is a very noble thing to do, a very noble thing to decide.
Yeah.
Also think being a career woman is very noble because it takes a lot of strength to leave your child with someone else as you go off to work every day. I'm not judging either one of those things. I think they're both great. But
Absolutely.
when you decide, when you take the path to dedicate your life to being a mom and a caretaker of the home, when those children, I got goosebumps, when those children leave, you can feel lost. You
Yeah.
can feel like, I don't know who I am. And it's a great way to end this podcast in a way, because this is all about finding out who you are. And if you have it all wrapped up in a role, I left my corporate career, I went into a tailspin for I don't even know how long, because I had attached so much of my worth to the amount of money I made, which was very nice, and how I felt, how those managing and leading those people made me feel. I had so much of myself wrapped up in that. It was a difficult thing to walk away from. And we're going to talk about that on a future episode of the podcast. But I love that. And I also think that knowing your strengths, talents, ability helps you find your voice and become a
Oh,
little more confident.
100%, which ties back into the claim your story.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was so fun. Let's end with the final question that I have. So
Okay.
I hope this is okay. I haven't even talked to you about this,
No, go right ahead.
but because I woke up with a dream thinking, this is the question, this is the final question. So
Okay.
you know how you always say, like, what do women really want?
Yeah.
Well, we're doing the Soul Sister series.
Yes.
So Terry, what are the qualities of a soul sister that you cherish?
Oh my gosh. Well, we've talked about some of them today already, but like the being seen, like I never feel more seen than when I'm with you. And I said it on I think it was the very first episode we did together, like being with you reintroduces me to myself, because it's so easy to lose your sense of self sometimes. And knowing that I'm cherished by you and valued by you fills my cup up 100%. I never feel neglected or taken advantage of, or like I'm bothering you, or I'm somehow a disruption in your life. I feel like a welcome addition to your life. I mean, I could probably go on, but like those are the first things that came to my head. So are you going to take time to answer that question too?
Well, you know, no, I'm not, because I'm sitting there taking in everything you just said, and it makes me choked up because you're seeing me for how I see you, and I don't have any words that are going to top yours. So thank you for.
Yeah, you're welcome. When you post something very, very kind about me on Facebook, I can't ever respond to it. Did you ever notice that?
No, I haven't.
I can't, because it's the stupidest thing, but I feel like somehow if I respond to it, nothing I could say would ever measure up to what you've said, and it would cheapen
Oh.
every beautiful thing you say. So I never respond, but I go back and I read it several times over, and it just makes my whole heart so happy. So she's such a, Amanda audience she is such a thoughtful person. Her words they're not just words. They're very thoughtful, thought out things. She's very genuine. I love that about you so much.
Well, thank you. I
Love
can't
her.
wait. I can't wait to ask our guests that question all season
Absolutely.
long. So, like, what are the qualities of a soul sister? The feedback that we've gotten so far is, I long for a soul sister, and the two of you inspire me to find that friendship. So, yeah, yeah.
So good. Well, everybody, thank you so much for joining us today. Any parting words, Miss Amanda?
I just say, keep searching, keep digging, be an archaeologist of your own life, and have fun with it, and give yourself grace.
Oh, absolutely. I love that. That's a great way to end the show. Take care, everybody.
Take care.
Well, that's a wrap for this week. Thank you so much for joining us. We're so glad to be here with you.
And just remember, we're here to serve. Reach out, connect with us on social media platforms, and dig in deeper.
Yes, all those links will be in the podcast show notes. So join us. We can't wait to continue the conversation with you over there. Until next time, everybody, take care.